either way, it's 7 o'clock. Why don't we go ahead and get started? Just so we can make sure to use everyone's time wisely. Because I see we do have a quorum here. So I will go ahead and call the meeting to order. I don't have a gavel or anything to bang, so we'll just call it good. And start with a roll call. I am Rick Fieldhouse. I am present.
Mr. Chair, maybe I'll go through it since it's always odd protocols when we're on Zoom. So Rick Fieldhouse is present.
Yeah.
Charles Watson.
Present.
Ryan Howard. Not here. Gary Linhart is excused. He had a work issue that came up. Chuck Zickafoos.
Here.
And Liam Decken.
Right here.
And of course, your staff. Doug and Sue.
So, well, first question, Mr. Watson, do you prefer Chuck or Charles?
Chuck is good.
Okay, because I just see
Thank
your
you.
little
When I'm
name
called-
tag.
And when I'm called Charles, that's usually means I'm in trouble. So
Yeah, the only people that know me as Richard are the government and my bank.
exactly.
So. All right, well, thank you, Doug, for the roll call. Public comments, we have to at least say, are there any public comments? I do not see any members of the public in the meeting. I see staff and commissioners. So I'm afraid that is it. Okay. Well, approval of the minutes. If everyone has had a chance to review the minutes as distributed, are there any additions, deletions, or corrections that need to be made to the minutes as distributed?
I move their adoption.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
So it's been moved and seconded to adopt the minutes. So let's go ahead and vote. All in favor of adopting the minutes, please say aye.
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 Okay, the ayes have it. The minutes are adopted.
Chuck, I think Brian is just coming over. I was having difficulty getting him moved.
Okay.
So
We will just take just a couple seconds here. Okay,
There he
there is Commissioner Ryan. Just got into the call. Welcome, Commissioner Ryan.
Thanks. I've been in here. I just didn't see my mute button or my video button. So
Oh, okay.
thanks for promoting me.
All right. I know it's a little unusual, but since we are having to adapt to additional world. Commissioner Ryan, do you have any additions, deletions, or corrections to the minutes?
No, sir.
Okay, then we will not revisit the minutes. Thank you for that.
It's odd, we can hear Ryan, but it shows muted.
Did I think?
He's
There.
swapping back and forth. I see. He's not brave enough. He's not a brave man.
I'm quick
leave
to
his
the
mic
mute.
on. Okay. So, let's see here. We have our next agenda item, the work program. And that really is our one big main agenda item. I will admit I'm playing catch up since I missed the August meeting. So is there someone, staff or commissioner, that would like to maybe take the lead on the discussion? Doug, I didn't know if you had something you need to present.
Oh, well, Mr. Chair, I think I'll just kind of kick this off. So we've had a series of conversations about trying to develop a 5-year work program. Part of this came about is we are a certified local government. So with the opportunities to have to apply for grants to the state parks And the last round came up, and of course, we did not have a work program, so I was unable to put together a grant application. And Curry said, well, next round. So next round will be coming up soon. In the past, the commission has talked about what they want to try to accomplish in the arena of historic preservation. We've done a series of things already, but we're trying to look to the future. And I've shared with the commission that I'm trying to get many of my commissions to try to think strategically and think, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 years out. Since you only meet on a quarterly basis, opportunities may come up for things, and it would be good to know what your priorities are so that staff can appropriately respond to those particular opportunities. So we've gone through a series of discussions, and at our last meeting in August, we had a long list of things, which is actually the last page of your packet this evening. And through that discussion, and I won't call it debate because it was not a debate, but it really truly was a discussion, and all the members sharing their views and opinions, we came up with the top 6 priorities over the course of the next 5 years. Then there are 13 other items that were identified. So the first was George Fox. So they did receive the grant for the Mapping Our History project. And of course, I've mentioned at the last meeting, I've been coordinating with the university on that. I actually attended a national conference that they had where they had their sponsors or partners participate. So I spent time on that particular virtual meeting. Very enlightening to hear academics across the country talking about the different programs that they're working on. Took me back to my college days, Rick. Then the next one on the list, based upon the ranking of the commission, was the historic district in the downtown and that designation. We've talked about this on a number of occasions. We know it is a stair-step process to go through, starting with education. We've talked in the past about there are potentially some fears that if you create a district, it's going to encumber property owners and what they can do with their land. But as we've shared and discussed in the past, we have a couple of ways it could be approached. The traditional method of creating a boundary. This is an historic district. You've got your primary resources, your secondary resources, contributing resources, and then those that do not contribute. And you can create a local program however you want. It can be extremely rigid or it can be extremely flexible. The other item we talked about was the displaced method, which is basically looking at time periods. So we've talked in the past about looking at the library, the city hall, and the post office, all generally built in that early 1910 to 1915 kind of time period. And then others can be identified. And at one point in time, we had talked about bringing in the SHPO office and Robert to kind of talk about that displaced method as well as the standard method. So that came out as number 2. Number 3, because we did have one meeting where it was not an official meeting, but we did have the Downtown Coalition and Taste Newberg present and talking about just marketing the downtown, making people more aware of the cultural resources that do exist in the downtown, and to those who are visiting Newberg from outside the community, those may coming from Portland or from around the world. We've got a lot of people come from all over the place to come to Newberg for a variety of reasons. It could be for educational for their kids. It could be for wine tasting. It could be for agritourism. It could be for recreational opportunities. So the Downtown Coalition, collaborating and supporting their particular initiatives is related to the Main Street program. Then we talked about updating our historic inventory list. We have not touched that in a number of years. We did some additional work in the downtown area. We do have the list. It's available online. You can see that. But part of the conversations where there are a number of structures now that are more than 50 years old that were not more than 50 years old in 1985 or in 1993 or in 1995. Of course, that is a long process to go through, just as kind of that educational piece in Oregon's system. Historic resources fall under Goal 5. There is an economic, social, environmental, and energy consequence analysis that would need to be done. Then the property owner has the ability by state law to opt out. They could say right at the very beginning, no, we do not want to be considered for any of this. So that's a process that I've shared with the commission before. I've done, but it does take time and resources in order to be able to do it. The fifth item on the list was coordinating with Taste Newberg. And so this gets back to more of the tourism side of the activities, where the Downtown Coalition was supporting activities such as chapters and the restoration of the front facade and the Cameo Theater, where they supported our application to get the property listed on the National Register. They also were a big participant in getting the state grant funds for the new seats and so forth, and some improvements on the interior of that space. But for Taste Newberg, it's more of the marketing side, letting people know, far and wide about the historic resources that do exist in the downtown area. The last one of those top priorities was the historic building facade. And so we do have, again, a number of resources in the downtown. Is the opportunity to potentially apply for grant funds to partner with a property owner to do those restorations of those storefronts or those building facades. And so we've had two of those. We had the Diamonds in the Rough project at the 2nd Street Church on 1st Street. And then, of course, Chapters was the next one that came along. I have not talked to Brian Francis about any type of potential grant opportunities for any restorations of the Cameo Theater in the Marquee. Of course, we know that the Marquee was damaged at one point in time, so it is not original. Then we went to that long list of the other 13 items, as I kind of identify those more as the ticklers, the things to pay attention to. And I won't go through all of them, but I'll go through the first maybe 3 or 4. And that's signage. And so Commissioner Linhart has brought this issue up a number of times about signage and to identify historic resources that exist within the community. As always, a reminder, conversations I've had with Curry Gill down at the state parks is that we cannot use CLG money to do signage. So that would take some type of initiative by this particular commission to do a capital campaign to raise funds in order to put signage in the community. I know Barbara, she had a real interest in signage down at the mill. And so I have talked with the mill property owner and the opportunity to reserve some space in the future, that some historic sign that could represent, the activities at the mill from the early days of Spalding, up through its final operation as a paper mill by SP Fiber. But again, it would take finding private dollars in order to put some type of interpretive signage. And we've talked about that signage possibly being down on South River Street, south of the bypass, that would coordinate with the bypass trail. And CPRD has received some grant funds from the Oregon Department of Transportation to build the path basically from Highway 219 down to 14th Street. A portion of that is already constructed between Winooski and River Street. Then go ahead. Somebody have a question? Okay. So there was the signage for historic structures and the interpretive signage, and they'll kind of put those together, but there were some distinctions in the last meeting of the commission. And then Liam brought up the idea of banners along Highway 99. And that was kind of like item number 9 on the list.
Sorry, that wasn't me. That was the last student commissioner.
Was it?
Mhm.
Oh, okay. Well, the issue brought up about, having banners. And so we do have banners in the downtown area. And so we have an agreement with George Fox, and they rotate, and we do holiday banners. Of course, then the holiday lights come out. And so the idea was, could there be banners that represent Newberg's history that could be extended out along Highway 99. So think of it from the east end of the couplet, basically out to the hospital. There would be some coordination would have to be done with ODOT because that is an ODOT transportation facility. And the last one was bikeway signage and incorporation of what some historical information. So we've done a little bit of that back when Jessica was here. And so that's the Heritage Trail program. And so if you happen to be down on 2nd Street or River or even on 9th Street, you'll see that there's some Heritage Trail signs to try to encourage individuals to be able to get out, bike and walk along the different roadways. And then, of course, there's more. We've always talked about digital technology, and there was the idea of Google Apps. And I know with the GFU program, they were talking about platform of Google to try to be able to do some of that. Loosely, grant opportunities, training opportunities that come up through the state, and wayfinding signage. That's something a little bit bigger as part of the overall kind of downtown improvement plan, the East Gateway, the West Gateway, the North area, the cultural district and its long range plans it has for signage. And then kind of another loose one was number 13 is just properties on the National Register. Of course, everybody can get on and you can Google and you can see how many we have that are within a Newberg zip code. Doesn't mean they're within the city of Newberg because there are a variety of those that are outside. So that's really all I have, Mr. Chair. And it was really more for the commission to discuss, do you still agree that these top 6 are your top 6? Do you want to move something up, move something out of the top 6, move something out of the group of number on the 2nd tier from 1 to 13? And I'll leave that up to all of you.
Well, then I guess.
I have a question for Doug, Chair, if I can.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Ryan.
So Doug, one thing I don't see on there, maybe you can update me on the ones for seismic upgrades. I know a lot of the historic buildings are probably some of the most vulnerable to that. And I don't recall if we've ever had too much of a discussion about using, local government grant funds for encouraging or supporting seismic updates.
It did not come up in our past discussions, Ryan.
Is that something that you've heard of any other communities doing perhaps?
I've seen that more of local funds rather than grant or state funds being applied. In my time down in Salem, we were using urban renewal funds to do not really the seismic component of that, but more of the fire and life safety, elevators and sprinkler systems and so forth. And that was the balance of it for that seismic was more left up to the property owner. I'm not specifically aware of communities in the state of Oregon that use grant funds for seismic.
Yeah, I'm sure that the amount of these funds is not large enough to do a big impact, but I don't know if it would be large enough to encourage some businesses to do it themselves or some building owners, I guess.
Yeah, we do have a lot of, as you all know, we have a lot of unreinforced masonry buildings in the downtown. And, if the big Cascadia quake does hit, some surmise that most of downtown will be on the ground.
Doug, can you explain the difference between wayfinding and signage?
So signage may be, in part what the Historical Society did for, 5 or 6 historic structures in the downtown where we had the pedestal signs modeled off the city of Silverton. And so signage that helps those who may be walking down the street, visitors, businesses, local residents, and so forth. Here's some history about this particular structure. Another way, and it's come up in the past, is signage for National Register properties. Should we have a uniform type of system? Should it be a plaque that's on the wall? So that any and all National Register properties within Newberg are consistent. Then you've got more the wayfinding signage, and that's more, I would call that much broader. So think of the 100-acre downtown area, and you may have wayfinding signs that direct you. You can have a sign that says, the Hoover Minthorn House is at the corner of River and 2nd Street. The Union Block building is at the corner of College and 1st Street. The Cameo Theater is on 1st Street, just to the east of X. It's a way to try to orient people of how they move around within the downtown area than a specific site. So think of it as a way of wayfinding is that broader orientation method, where that specific site signage may be a pedestal or a sign that's attached to the building that gives you some additional history. Then this commission has talked about having that digital component, which kind of leads to the Google app portion of it. So that as you're walking, and I always encourage people to, when you're walking, don't always be looking at your phone because you will trip, fall, or get hit by a car. But you could use that Google app to be able to help orient you or find out some additional history about a particular resource before they actually ever get there. And then they get to visually see that site in that particular structure. That help, Chuck?
Yeah, it's kind of halfway between a museum walk and a department store.
Yeah, the way I keep track of it, Chuck, is signs are signs, but wayfinding is specifically thinking of how do we put up what you and I, what a casual person would say, that's a sign, but to direct someone somewhere. That's kind of a real layman's way of putting it. We'd still look at it and say, oh, that's still a sign.
It is a sign of a type.
Yeah.
And there's a whole methodology nationwide on wayfinding signage. And if you're out in nature, how it's done, how it looks, and different systems about how it works when you are in more urban areas. And we're in that rural area, so we're not rural out in the woods, but we're not in a large metropolitan area. We're just kind of in this area in between.
Yeah. So I know it's one of those things that it's a terminology that I really had to educate myself on when I first started hearing that term. But it makes sense because it allows us to be more specific about what's the point of putting a placard on a post or something like that. Is it to
I
inform?
counted
Is it
8
correct?
instances where either signage or wayfinding was cited in the 13 or the 719 list. So it's something that should be high on our priority, and it is.
Well, and one of the problems we do run into though is the CLG funds don't cover either, as far as I understand.
That is correct. In conversations I've had with the state, that
Yeah.
they do not fund signage. We have been working on an urban renewal program where we were talking about signage and wayfinding in the downtown area of that proposed district. And that particular committee chose not to go there. They focused on infrastructure, sewer, water, roads, wastewater systems, things that create new investment and create jobs.
So,
Can you explain where the George Fox program is at #1, partnering?
It's been a little bit silent as the lead has been out of the office for an extended period, but I did talk with Rob Felton and the students are working on that. So I will know more after the first of the year, Chuck.
yeah, I wasn't quite sure since they were had gotten a grant to do that work. I wasn't sure what the time frame that they had. I was trying to find in some of the in the minutes. Didn't see a specific mention of
It's
what their time frame was.
well, so they got the grant and then it was delayed because of COVID-19. And essentially the big push of the body of the work will occur this academic year.
Well, I do note that in the minutes of our last meeting, that Chuck, you had expressed the interest in hearing the absent commission members, myself, and I believe Ryan also missed our last meeting. But looking over what we have, this is actually just a wonderful distillation of what we've been talking about for, well, quite some time now, good couple years. So to be honest, I am very comfortable with the priorities that were that came up in August. I don't really see anything that I feel needs to be changed or concern that was not raised. Because I trust my other commissioners that we seem to be pretty much on the same page as where we're wanting, what our priorities are. Maybe some different means of getting there, but just these top 6, and then are I feel real solid. Of course, I make no secret about it. My real goal is to get, at the end of this 5 years, get a historical district out of it. But using these other things to get there, stepping stones, an updated historical inventory, just the data gathering, the partnerships with other groups to essentially raise awareness. Because even though Taste Newberg may be focused on drawing in tourism, just exposure to them can help raise awareness of the benefits that a historic district could bring, and regardless of what form that district takes.
Yeah,
Ian, you have a comment? I'm sorry, Doug, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no, go ahead. I was just going to say, and part of that marketing from Taste Newberg is when they're promoting, the painted lady, is the reference to it's in this historic structure. If they're talking about recipe, it's in this historic structure.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we just talk about the restaurant and the quality of the food, but there's more to it than that.
Yeah.
And the executive director and I have chatted, and I think there's an opportunity in their marketing efforts to add this historic component into what they're doing to, again, educate and increase awareness. So I'm sorry, Liam, that's what I just kind of wanted to chime in with.
Oh, no, not at all, please. Yeah. And also, I guess to add on to that, you can also say something about like land ownership, especially because Taste Newberg, they're very focused on one group, the historical land ownership would absolutely help with that. But my question to ask is specifically on the signage. Sorry if this is a stupid question, but would we focus on buildings we know are going to go on the historic register or the historic district, like, the library, the postal office, and the city hall and whatnot? Should we focus more on those, I guess? Sorry if that's a bad question.
No, it's a good question.
Signage.
From what the commission has talked about, we're talking about just the high level of signage. And so then you drill down in that work program, and there would need to be further conversations about, if we're talking just about the downtown, we're talking about signage, where do you start? We have 5 or 6 now of pedestals. Okay, that's one thing. But there are other resources, and then it's trying to create that uniformity so that if you are a resident or you are a visitor and you're walking down the street and you see that sign, oh, I saw that one down the street. There's something unique here. I want to stop and take a look at that and read whatever it may be, a placard on the wall or a pedestal sign that gives you a little bit more history about that particular site. So those are the details. And so right now, what I'm trying to get to is kind of what these higher priorities are. And the intent would be then to share this with the city council and say, this is what your historic commission has identified as their priorities over the next 5 years. There are more details. It's a little bit akin, I've worked through this with our Affordable Housing Commission, and we came up with some broad categories on a 5-year work program. And it ended up the same. There's a list of things that are outside the 5 years. Doesn't mean we're forgetting them. It's just that those were not the top priorities. But then there's all the details that go underneath each one of those. And so I have a lot of conversations with them about, okay, so you want to do a housing production strategy. Okay, so we went, as an example, we went and applied for a grant. We believe we're going to get that grant. That's going to lead to 13 months worth of work, to 16 months worth of work. And so there's a lot of detail that goes underneath each one of those.
Sorry, I think I worded my question a bit wrong. Sorry about that. Should we focus like the signage on those buildings that we know are going to be in the historic district if they don't already have signage? Because both of those are top priorities there. Sorry if I'm just repeating myself again. Just
I would leave
let
that
us
up to
know.
the other commission members to respond to.
Well, a lot of the work we've done so far is very much picking the low-hanging fruit. We look and say, okay, what are things that have just are easy targets? It's like the Cameo Theater, for example. It's very visible. We were able to help facilitate getting it on the historic register just recently. It's a structure that people know, recognize, love, and so that's something that it's a great example of the low-hanging fruit. At what point, so you do have kind of a good point here. Do we start expanding out from the easy things, the old library, city hall, Cameo, those kind of things, to the less known things, that little, some little building on a corner that may have, be a wonderful example of architecture of its period, but to our modern eyes, we look at it and say, it's just a little, little brick shed, essentially. And it may have been something that was important to the history of Newberg, but how do we elevate that so that someone who doesn't know the history of Newberg, doesn't know, may not be an aficionado of architecture of the 1920s, how do we communicate to them? Like a great example is the just our street markings project, figuring out where our horse rings are, our sidewalk stamps. How do we direct people's eyes to those to get them to appreciate the history that's literally underfoot, that we walk over every day but never really look at? So therein lies some questions. That's why we have to make these priorities. And there's also some cart and horse logistics here. If we have, well, first off, anything we get from our certified local government grants can't go to signage, just period. That's just a given. Those specifically cannot go to any kind of signage, including wayfinding. That's just a restriction of the grant, the way the grant is written. So if we did want to do something with signage, we would need to get the money from another source besides CLG grants. Either say, hey, city council, here's something that we want you to put in the next budget. Or look elsewhere. Are there other grant opportunities or something that we could get some funds for? Fortunately, we can partner with other organizations. One way we can do it is we can get a grant to fund the research. We can learn all about that little brick building, have someone go through archives, paid researcher, go through archives, paid by grant money, come up with photos, articles, etc. And then we can say, oh, hey, Newberg Historical Society, or hey, Rotary, how would you guys, if you want to put up a sign talking about this building, here's a whole folder full of research. All you have to do is pay for a pedestal and a sign. That's something we can do. So that's kind of we could do a lot of the grunt work. It's just that final piece that we can't do, at least through our CLG grant, I'm saying. My vision has always been that we are going to use the CLG grant to do a lot of that homework, do a lot of that research, have those folders, file cabinets full of information, so that when and then go to someone and say, hey, wouldn't it be really cool if you had a brochure for a walking tour? Here's all the sites that you want to put on that brochure. Or here is all the information, all the research, or at least the bulk of the research done for putting all this into a historic district. And that way we can kind of create this, basically pre-made, project for other people, private groups, or the city out of its own pocket, or other grant sources to do the work. So does that make sense?
It does. I did some research on Quonset huts around town, and I never did find how they got here. And I think that would be something that would be of interest to, and I don't know if you realize that the tattoo parlor on First Street is a Quonset hut.
See, if we updated our historic inventory, we would find that all these buildings, because it's that magic 50-year mark. Once something gets to be 50 years, it is officially historic, at least in terms of, when we're doing historic preservation. Now, there are cases when it can be younger than 50 years. If you can make a strong enough case for it, but once it's past 50 years, that's kind of the magic age, and here we are, 2021, which means 50 years. We're talking 1971, anything built before 1971, which includes a lot of things that people would never think of as historic. Oh goodness, I can remember what corner it is on. That there's a title company that's in a building that used to be a bank. It's on Hancock. Oh goodness, it's not college. It's
Tycor. It's
Tycor.
College in Hancock has Tycor.
The Tycor. If it's the one I'm thinking of, it is as far as I know, one of the only instances of brutalist architecture in downtown Newberg. If you know brutalist architecture, it is a form of architecture that involves big concrete slabs. People often associate it with government buildings and prisons and things like that. But it was a trend at the time. And so in theory, we could consider that, hey, historic, because it's old enough. Now, that's kind of a hard sell compared to, hey, here is a Art Nouveau or streamlined modern building, or something that's a, classical craftsman style home, that those are easier sells than a, brutalist bank. But technically, someone, might consider, oh yeah, it's historical. Oh, I'm a big fan of brutalist architecture. Oh, hey, there's some in Newberg. I'm going to check that out. I know I'm kind of reaching there, but in theory, that could happen if we had that, listed on our on an inventory. So that's kind of, I know I'm kind of rambling, but it's when you only meet once a quarter, I end up with a lot to say. So, well, Doug, let me put you on the spot here. What are we needing to get done tonight? Let's really, and I put some bookends on this. What do we, are we, what kind of product do we need to provide you so you can move forward with what you need to do?
So what I'm looking for from this commission is consensus that your list of your top 6 is your priority over the course of the next 5 years.
Okay.
If you want to formalize that by someone putting forward a motion and a second and a vote, I would love that, but I will take consensus amongst the commission members as well.
Well, so I guess at this point,
I'll make that motion that these 6 items be our official items that Doug can take to the council and say, this is what the historical commission has decided.
okay. So Commissioner Zikifus has moved that we formally submit this list of 6 items, these 6 items that are on the memorandum, as our as recommendations to the council, the city council, as our goals for the next 5 years. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. So let's see. Thank you, Commissioner Watson. So seconded by Commissioner Watson. Is there any discussion? I know we've been discussing all evening, or at least for the past 45 minutes. Is there any further discussion about this specific motion before we vote?
I want to ask if we shouldn't rather vote to approve the whole list to send that to council rather than just the top 6. I know it might just be a semantical thing, but do we want to move to adopt the whole list with that emphasis on those 6?
Okay, so you're saying basically submit essentially everything on the memorandum as our goal, but with the emphasis being that our focus is the top 6.
If I recall from the last meeting, if I recall right from the last meeting, and Doug, maybe you can keep me honest here, there was a reason why we only came up with the 6 rather than all that we had there. I just don't remember why that was.
In part, there were some that were on that list in this, what I'll call the second tier, where there was only one vote or one consensus. And so I tried to put that in, capture more in the minutes, really. But Commissioner Howard raises a point, is that you could have the emphasis of this is our top 6, but we did have these other 13 that we talked about, and there may be opportunities that come up. You just never know. And all of a sudden, something on item number 12, you've got a financial opportunity to advance that. Should we be able to respond to it?
Would it be Well, let me ask you, Doug, then. In reporting this to the city council, if we put it into the form of here are the top 6 items, but we had also considered these additional 13, where those were also considered. But the focus, emphasize the top 6 are this is where we're going, but here are some things that were considered, and if an opportunity arose, could be acted on. I don't know, would that seems, because I don't want to confuse the council with what we're doing.
Well, so I think I would respond to that, Mr. Chair. When I did this with the Affordable Housing Commission, we had a list of 50 items. And so they went through a long process to try to winnow that down and looking at staffing resources and saying, what could we accomplish in any specific year? What things were at the local level we had control over, and what things were going to come at us that are mandated by the state. So they basically took those 50 items and created that, well, we wanted to do these 3 or 4 things in the first year, these 3 or 4 things in the second year, and then the 4th year and the 5th year. And then there's this catch-all list of things that want to do, but it's kind of outside that 5 years. We're not losing sight of it. And so the council has seen this kind of methodology before. So as an example, in that work program, we were looking to do a housing production strategy in fiscal year 22-23. A grant opportunity came up where we believe we're going to get a grant. Now that's going to happen in fiscal year 21-22. So that means that we had to then shuffle. And so I just gave the council an update on that work program. Not at their last meeting, but the meeting before, and said, oh, we've got this thing now that moved up because of an opportunity. So now we need to take one of these other items and we need to move that into the fiscal year 22-23. So the moral of that story is that the council understands there's flexibility because things happen. But for them, it's good to have an understanding of where this commission wants to go. And so if it, based on Ryan's comment, it is that here's our work program, and I'm going to use my words, here's our work program. Our emphasis over the next 5 years are these 5, but we have these other 13 opportunities that we don't want to lose track of. And one of these other 13 may move up into the top 6. And the council will be okay with that, because I also have another program of our community visioning, which I'm just doing the annual report for. And so I'm talking about what these different commissions are doing and how they tie to the community visioning program that the community came up with and what we accomplished over the course of the last year. So it's a big fabric.
Okay. Well, so Ryan, is there something specific that you feel needs to be bumped from the other items to the focused, the focused items? Was there any specific thing that you wanted to see given more of the limelight?
No, my point wasn't to.
Okay.
I wasn't to try and elevate anything or make sure the council. So I would amend the motion to say that we adopt the list as prepared by staff.
Okay.
So if we're going to do that, then we need to go back to Chuck Sycophus, who made the motion. And do you accept Ryan's modification to that motion? Then we need to go back to Chuck and ask, do you support that as the one who did the second on that particular motion?
Yes, I support it.
Okay.
I do as well.
Okay. So looks like we have amended the motion. And both the arts, both Chucks have agreed that it is acceptable. Is there any further discussion before we put it to a vote then?
I
Liam,
guess
yeah.
I guess it's the obvious question here, but is there any downsides to sending the entire list? Would there be anything that subtracts from our 5 focus groups?
I
Focus.
don't really think so. Since the
Yeah.
goal was we wanted to show, hey, here's where we really want to go.
Yeah.
But here are some things that we at least had our eyes on.
Mhm.
Because that shows that we are not just heading off willy-nilly, that we do have a plan. We have a roadmap. But it also shows that we are not just so single-minded that we're completely shutting out any other opportunities. I think
Yeah.
it will make it makes things a bit easier for people to digest if they know that yeah, we thought of, someone may think or say, well, what about X, Y, and Z? They look down, oh, I see, they considered X, Y, and Z. It's just not one of the top priorities.
Well, it also really helps because when we do apply for grants, is that it
Yeah.
more often than not requires that the city council has to adopt a resolution to support the grant application.
Mhm.
So by the work that has occurred over the last year, trying to figure out what your priorities and your roadmap is, when we do have the opportunities to apply for a grant, the council will have seen this is the work program that this commission has developed. And now we're starting to apply for these different grants to implement that. So it will short circuit it. That's where we've run into some problems in the past is that we've been on such a short leash. It's been a challenge to try to get the commission to agree that we want to do something and then get the council to adopt the resolution to meet the grant application deadline.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
I guess last call for any discussion. Otherwise, let's put it to a vote. So all in favor of the motion to send the information as prepared by staff on to the city council for their acceptance. I guess all in favor, say aye. Raise
Aye.
your hand, maybe, since we're all on
Aye.
camera. So I see 4. I counted 4. Hopefully Doug did too.
Yes, I did.
All right. Because I know sometimes Zoom loses my hand. Yeah, when you're using a fake background, your hand
Yeah.
kind of goes through space every now and then. All right, so the motion is approved, and we'll send this on to council. So thank you for that work, everyone. Looking at our agenda, that was really it. Pretty straightforward today. We did take a lot of time on that, but I think it's time well spent. And especially just getting to know our new commissioners. I appreciate you fellows being here. And I apologize for not being around when you first came on board back in August. And maybe one of these days I might be able to meet you in person.
Hopefully.
Well, that is a good segue, Mr. Chair, because the next item on the agenda is our next meeting, which is
Yeah.
February 15th. So the city is looking to go to in-person hybrid meetings in January 2022. So I'm starting to ask my different commissions and committees what you feel about potentially meeting in person.
Well, I'll start. I have no trouble meeting in person. If depending on my comfort level, I may or may not wear a mask, and also depending on what the current regulations are at the time. But if I did have to meet and wear a mask, it wouldn't be the first group I was meeting with and all masked up and whatever.
Mhm.
So that's fine with me. I'm interested to hear what other folks have to say. We haven't been able to meet in person for a couple years now.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, I have several groups I meet with in person. I have no problems with it.
Okay.
I'll probably be on video if there's people there that aren't going to be in masks, including the public or anything. I work with immunocompromised people, and they've been extra cautious.
Yeah, understood.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know what the state regulations will be. But we can play it by ear. Of course, if masks are still mandated when we gather, then we will need to observe those regulations. But if you do have concerns regarding your own health or whatever, it sounds like we will be able to have people essentially broadcast in remotely. Is that what you say?
There'll be some
Hybrid?
additional details. I know Sue's been working on this with our IT department. So kind of starting with, getting a temperature of this commission. If we went back to in-person meetings, what do you think?
Mhm.
Then there may be the hybrid approach. The hybrid approach requires more staff time, more staff people to try to make it happen.
Mhm.
And then, or, continue on with Zoom for some period. Again, the system is fluid. I can't tell you what it's going to look like come January 1.
Mhm.
If I was watching the news as I was feeding the dog tonight, they're talking about cases rising across North America again. The cases are rising
Mhm.
across Europe. So where it might be come middle of December, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I know that in some other organizations I work with and for, we've just had to kind of play it by ear based on whatever the governor or a organizational leader decides. So I'm going to be flexible. I would love to meet in person. I'll just say that. I would love to meet in person if we have the opportunity, because it's just easier to communicate.
Well, if we did something like that, giving, keeping separation and so forth, it would likely not be in City Hall. It would more than likely be at the Public Safety Building. You keep
Mhm.
separation amongst commission members and staff and public.
I can walk to either just as easy.
Well,
And
again-
I wouldn't rule out me in person if this situation was.
Sorry, Ryan, you broke up a little bit there, but let me just try to restate. You said you're not adverse to meeting in person if the situation is improved. Okay,
Exactly, yeah.
thank you.
And yeah, I concur, really. Of course, respect mask laws, absolutely. But yeah, I'd love to meet you guys in person. I feel like it'd be easier to actually just like have a flush conversation, if that makes any sense. But yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
Well, I can say over the last 2 years, I've gotten shorter since I've seen all of you.
Oh, I might have to brush my teeth or put on deodorant or something. I don't know. I'll have to see what's in my medicine cabinet after all these years.
So, Mr. Chair, that was the last item I had for the meeting this evening.
Okay, well, thank you. So one way or the other, we are going to be meeting on the 15th of February, unless there is information to the contrary between then and now. And I assume we'll be all officially notified.
You will.
With that, if there is no further business to come before this commission, is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Okay, it's been moved. So I'll just declare, I don't think we need a second to adjourn, so I'll just say we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
See you
Have a
next
good-
time.
Have a good week.
Yeah.
Have a good
And-
holiday season.
Thank you. And it was great to meet both of you, Rick and Ryan.
True.
See you guys this
Yeah.
person. It's great to meet you.
It's a
Thanks for your participation, Liam.
so pleasure meeting you and especially meeting you for the first time, Liam and Chuck. I want to maybe at some point we can talk to each other and get to know each other a little bit so we can better get work done. Because it's always good if we at least have a common language. Of course, now that we're both on the same city commission, there's all those public ethics laws and things that we can't really get into business if you and I ever meet casually. So that's a big no-no. But we can talk about everything else. So,
I'm out of here.
all right, you fellas are all excused.
Bye,
You don't
Chuck.
have to hang around. I'm just seeing you off.